Welcome to What the Health? Where anything health is fair game as we tackle the trends and bust the myths about health and wellness. Here are your hosts, Dr. Dan and Angela Toro.
And welcome to another episode of What the Health. I am Dr. Dan here with my two co-hosts,
Angela,
Dr. Riley.
All right, you guys know the drill. We're here for informational purposes only, in no way offering individualized medical advice. Always talk to your trusted healthcare provider before making changes to your specific routine. So with that being said,
we're talking about objective outcomes today. Dr. Riley wanted to talk about this topic, so what do we mean by objective outcomes?
Objective, so something that you can measure. We go like subjective versus objective. So
what's subjective then?
Subjective is, like me asking you, how you feel today? It's something that is almost opinion based. And that's kind of why I chose, doing the technique that we do, the Pierce result system is there's a lot of objective measures. It holds the doctor accountable, lets the patient kind of know, hey, this is how I'm doing, this is how you're doing. I think it's the easiest way to build trust between a healthcare provider and their patients is objectively showing them, hey, this is changing.
Yeah. That's so important, and we can talk about a little bit of the technology that we use to analyze that. But I think that's really why medical doctors, especially in the 50s and 60s, gained so much trust and really were elevated to that pedestal of almost like a god, right? It doesn't, that authority level, it didn't matter what they said, doctor's orders. And it was like, you did what the doctor told you because you were, taking it on authority that what they said, that they knew what they were talking about. But they also, they have some good objective measures. Now, we can talk about whether or not, the objective measures they're looking at are, good for your health and well-being. But if you look at a blood test, or let's take blood pressure for the simplest example. Yeah. Okay, your blood pressure, you take someone's blood pressure a couple times and it's above 140/90. You are now diagnosed with high blood pressure. And they can give you a blood pressure medication. There's lots of different types. There's lots of different biochemical mechanisms of which those medications work, but you can start taking those and you will see a drop in your blood pressure. So that's a pre-post. That's an objective measure. Blood pressure's high, medication here, blood pressure down. Okay. Now, we can argue all day long whether or not that's healthy. We're not here to do that, but that's an objective measure. You go in and you have you get in a car accident and you've got a piece of metal sticking out of your side and, the surgeon is able to remove that, clean it, sew you back up. That's a pre and a post objective measure. Metal is inserted into your body and now the surgeon has been able to remove that. That's a high level of trust and before and after outcome. And I think that, as a society, you're right, it builds trust when, you can see those objective measures. But I would argue that, and maybe this is going to go in a different direction here, but I would argue that because of the overarching outcomes of where culturally and where the system of quote unquote healthcare has gone, we always talk about it being disease management, right? Those objective measures are now starting to, fight they're starting to go against the idea that are we actually getting healthier as a society, right?
Well, I think that's why we talk a lot about you need the objective measures, but then you need to understand what those objective measures are saying. So we always talk about knowing your numbers,
yes.
And not just knowing your numbers, knowing what they are, but understanding what those numbers mean. And I think that's where it's starting to become, we have these objective, blood pressure and cholesterol and all that's been tracked for how many decades now, but it's, are we truly understanding it? And then, and what are our choices when we see those numbers? Cause it's, like you said, okay, your blood pressure is 140/90. Here's a pill versus here's a conversation about what that means. What are the options and how are we going to get those numbers down? Why do we want to get those numbers down?
Yes.
And I think that's different than how we utilize our objective measures here, where it's not just, okay, great, your scan looks good, you're fixed, get out. It's, let's
have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I think the importance, as you brought up the scan, so we do infrared thermal scanning in the office, and thermal scanning has been, done since the days of Hippocrates, the father of, modern medicine. And he used to put mud packs all over patients, or you'd spread mud all over patients, and the area that dried the fastest was the area that he believed was the diseased area. So, so he would go and then look in that area. So it's like that's the earliest, understanding of, looking at temperature differences in the body as being areas that should be looked at. And so we don't spread mud, we don't sling mud at our patients.
I'm like, ooh, a mud bath sounds nice.
I know, right? Yeah, maybe we should do that. We don't sling mud at people, but we have a very high profile thermal camera. So we're scanning up the back, right over the spine. And that's important because that's right where the nerves from the central nervous system go into the peripheral nervous system and go out to every cell, tissue, and organ in the body. So we're trying to literally look at where the connection point is between central nervous system and peripheral nervous system and seeing temperature variations. And again, in an ideal world, we're making the, I don't want to say assumption, but, we're going off the idea that should be generally the same, right? The temperature in a healthy person across the spine, and the skin over the spine should be about the same within 1 to 2 degrees. And if we start seeing deviations outside that 2 to 3 degree range, it's been understood, through research that there is a disease process that could be developing, or if it's actually outside the 5 degree range, there is a disease process, whether or not it's been diagnosed, there is a disease process definitely growing and developing in the body. So the interesting thing then, Dr. Riley, with the thermal scanning is that we talk a lot about, in science, specificity, right? Mm-hmm. And so, the idea that infrared thermal imaging is not very specific, right? So what do we mean by that? We're just looking at the fact that there is some sort of interference going on in the system. There's some sort of stress in the system that's causing that massive temperature deviation. But it's not very, so the more specific a test, the more like one test means absolutely this diagnosis. So even an MRI is not very specific, right? Because you're looking across multiple layers of tissue. So an MRI is good for a lot of different things, kind of like the infrared thermal scanning. We don't necessarily know and are not out to diagnose your specific disease. We are looking at where are there deviations, stresses, distortions in your body, that could be enhancing or growing in the system. So we are trying to balance that nervous system, right, by balancing out that thermal scan. And when we do that, then we, are going back to the assumption that the body is designed to heal, right? And so if we get the interference, the distortion, removed from the body, then we know that the body is going to be working towards a healthier, regulated state. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's not very specific, right? We're not diagnosing you have high blood pressure because your scan looks like this, or you have, tingling and numbness because your scan looks like this. We're looking at, oh no, your system is
underlying problem.
Yeah, your system has, a significant amount of stress in it. How can we best remove the stress? And, again, a lot of it comes through chiropractic care when we start to make adjustments to the spine, and we have other technology to actually look at how is the spine moving. But then, we also look at training, and we also look at, dietary, what are you putting into your system? Maybe you need massage, maybe you need to breathe,
yeah,
you need to breathe better, mental, emotional. It's and those all have impacts on those distortions that we see in the infrared thermal pattern. So, again, is the test extremely specific? No, but it's extremely reliable and valid that if there is deviation on that scan, there is stress in your system somewhere that we need to go find, right? So that's the idea of an objective measure, and we can track very quickly, what we're doing in our care plans. Is it working? Is it working to bring that balance back to the system, or are there other avenues that we need to start exploring? So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. No, it's the specificity. versus like reliability. Yeah, it's objective measures sometimes, I guess in our realm, don't have to be too specific, but they need to be reliable. Because if we're doing a care plan for X amount of months, it's like, okay, we need to have reliable results that we're looking at, throughout that care plan.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not to say that if somebody comes in, because a lot of the times people will be like, well, that can't be right. Like they're coming in and things will hurt, and they have a perfect scan, and so it's like, it's not to say that we're not also listening to, and that you guys aren't also like doing, palpation and seeing and feeling that. But again, it's one of the measures that we use, and it's about that, across time, seeing how it's changing or not changing, and allowing that conversation to happen. Yeah. And again, that's why we also start with the X-rays for everybody, because that right there is, it's like, it doesn't matter if you feel it or not. if your spine is, jacked, for lack of better, at some point it's going to be an issue. And so it's like starting with that. Now again, we're not going to do the X-rays every time because that would be excessive. Yeah. So but again, we do repeat those throughout people's care plans to see, how are you changing? How is your spine changing on that structural level? Yeah. In addition to how's your thermal scan changing? And and we also want to know how you're feeling, and hopefully those things are all going together. But
correct.
As we've talked about, we talked about this on our last podcast, what's it called? Journey to Path to, I don't remember what it was called.
Yeah, the path to optimal health.
Yeah, that. It's not a straight line. Yeah. So that's why the objective measures are so important, especially for the patient to see too, but I think more important for you as a health professional to see, because we will often see the changes before
they start feeling it.
Yes. And I've noticed the same thing as a trainer. It's like people sometimes just don't, it's so easy to get stuck on, if you're not feeling well, it's easy to get stuck on what doesn't feel good and not pay attention to what maybe is starting to feel better. And same thing if you've started a new exercise program, it's so easy to get stuck on,
I heard more.
Or like, this is why this is still so hard. Like, it's still, as opposed to seeing all the things you can do now. And, I remember I had a client I was working with for years, and he's like, I don't understand why this isn't getting any easier. I'm like, because I keep making it harder as you get stronger. And he's like, oh, I'm like, you don't have, I'm like, just yesterday I had him do a circuit that was twice as long than he's ever done. And he's like, man, that was so hard. I'm like, yeah, it's the longest circuit we've ever done. Yeah. And that's why it was hard. So having those, and again, it's because I, as a professional, am tracking and seeing, okay, he can do X, Y, and Z now, which means we can go to the next progression, versus somebody who can't stand on one foot. I'm not going to be like, okay, well, step up on that box.
Where the measurements come in.
Exactly.
We'll have patients we'll see for, a year or two, and they're like, I don't.
I'm not getting any better.
Yeah. I'm like, do you remember when you came in for migraines twice a week or something like that?
Yeah, when's the last time
you had one? And they're like, my leg still hurts. I'm like, okay, we'll work on that too. But objectively, I show you this, so so
well, and that really that goes back to solidify the point about specificity, right? Because your body, again, when you trust the underlying assumption that your body is designed to heal, okay, and it's designed to heal and self-regulate and adapt. When you trust that, then you have to kind of be more, as a practitioner, you have to be more facilitative of someone and not authoritative, right? So we talked about that at the beginning. When you're authoritative, you go in and say, well, I am, forcing my will, and your blood numbers need to be here. So I'm going to put you on this medication until your blood numbers come down into that range that I want it to be at, rather than, hey, we're not seeing the specificity of, but we're seeing stress patterns change, with that infrared thermal scan. And so the body knows what it needs to work on first. We've had patients, come in with, they have some sort of like underlying disease process, like a cancer that has not been diagnosed yet. And I'm not saying we diagnose cancer. We do not do that. But when you are scanning someone and they are not, they're not feeling any better, but maybe their scans are starting to change a little bit. And then all of a sudden they go in for like an annual checkup, and then, they come back in and they're like, oh, I was diagnosed with such and such. It's like, well, no wonder you're not feeling better. Your body is fighting like a cancerous disease. It doesn't care that your little pinky is sore and in pain, or it doesn't care that you have like, this little bit of an earache or vertigo. It's like, it's trying to, it's trying to prioritize what's going on, and all its energy and focus and attention is on the burning, the burning building that's going on inside your body. So like, with that, we have to be more facilitative, and, and you brought it up perfectly, Dr. Riley. Hey, maybe they came in with leg pain, and, that leg pain isn't getting better, but, oh, by the way, my headaches of twice a week for 10 years are reduced to, less than once a month. I'm sleeping much better. I have a more positive outlook. I'm breathing better. Now I'm able to, exercise a little bit, and therefore I'm making better decisions about it's like, but my leg still hurts. And then you say, oh, well, my doctor or my chiropractor failed me. Like, it doesn't work. And it's like, doesn't it? Sounds to me like a whole lot of it worked, So it's like, like we always say, sometimes we need to handhold our patients through difficult times. Sometimes they need a good kick in the ass, right? It's like, sorry, I've been swearing more in my podcast today.
Very feisty.
Yes. But that's why, again, in an ideal world, the subjective measurements, like, hey, I'm actually feeling better, I feel like I'm functioning better, like those subjective changes are improving, and then we are seeing the objective changes that match that. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't match perfectly because there's underlying things going on. And so, we have to trust that there's a lot more going on in the body and it knows what it's doing. And sometimes it's, it's a great way to say, hey, this isn't changing, or, hey, we need to have that conversation. Yeah. Maybe it's time that we refer you to another health professional. You need to go try this, you need to go do that. And it's like, we understand that we are not the end all be all for everyone. But, I really feel like as a center point, looking at your spine and nervous system as the foundation of, your health and well-being, first line of defense, right? I said that to a patient last night, actually, was in the office, because a couple weeks ago, he went into the ER because he was literally having pain in his chest, the tingling and numbness, pain down his arm. So he went to the ER, and they checked everything in his heart, completely cleared. Okay. And so he called me and, came into the office, and within a couple visits, like, tingling, numbness in his arms, completely gone. Chest pain, almost like 90% gone. Completely just, completely like recentering of his system and his health and well-being. And I said, how cool would it be if they had a chiropractor that knew what they were doing in the ER? And someone like that, before you run like, a million tests and like, thousands of dollars of tests and time with, other, major health professionals, you analyze their spine and their nervous system, got that cleared out and balanced, and then, made the decision on, what's the next line of defense, So you said that first line of defense, sometimes it's that chiropractor that, hey, you need to get your system, you need to get your nervous system coordinating better. Yeah. And that's what we have the objective measures to be able to look at with the infrared scan, with the motion x-ray technology. We're seeing in real time, where is the problem? The term we use is subluxation, but it's the misalignment, the restriction, the distortion in the spine that's causing an irritation to the nervous system. And if we can get that cleared out, even just over a couple of visits to get your body moving in the right direction, then again, we become, we really handle the body. We don't. The body handles a lot of other, of those, aches and pains and, irritations, because it knows how to be healthy in the absence of interference. Yep. And we have ways of measuring that. So, in the essence of time, and I think we could really dive further down the rabbit hole with a lot of those objective measures, but, having a trusted health professional, whether it's a functional trainer, whether it's a massage therapist, a chiropractor, your functional medical doctor, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that they are having objective measures, and those objective measures are matching, what your goals for your health and well-being are. And so, with that being said, if you have any questions about the types of measurements we do in our office, or looking for, a better way, a better journey to improve your health and well-being for you or a family member, I definitely challenge you to reach out. Turo, Turo, familychiropractic.com. And we hope to just keep the conversation going. So thanks for stopping by.
Right. We'll see you next time.
See you at the next one.
You've been listening to What the Health with Dr. Dan and Angela Toro, brought to you by Toro Family Chiropractic. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.whatthehealth.world.